You know, of course, we've been pushing for the last couple of years the issue of eugenics through our MAFA 21 and so forth. Now, many of the pro-aborts are coming out here now and just openly stating, yeah, abortion is about eugenics. They're openly stating it. In a recent book, The Chronicle of Higher Education, one of these people from Johns Hopkins University, Nathaniel Comfort, he's a professor at the Institute of the History of Medicine at the Johns Hopkins University, makes the point. He says, look, talking about eugenics, and he's saying basically don't get all jacked up about this. He says, we practice eugenics because we, quote, regularly abort fetuses that test positive for Down syndrome, unquote. Mm-hmm. He's right. Mm-hmm. Sure. That's eugenics. That's where you're saying, if you look at the history of eugenics, when Francis Galton and James Charles Darwin came up with the idea, when you look at it, they said we're gonna decide who gets to live and who gets to die in order to better the human race. We're gonna control evolution. That's what they were saying.
And that is so unjust. You know, the mere fact such injustice is taking place, this is where people should be just outright. I mean, this, I'm afraid for this nation. We're just barbaric.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you know, when we've talked about this before many times on Live Talk here, 97% of all babies diagnosed with Down syndrome are murdered in the womb. 97%.
You know, as soon as a government or a culture says that choice is more important than life, then we ought not be surprised at anything, because if you have the choice to kill someone, you also have the choice for what reason you want to kill them.
Right.
I mean, the door is wide open, not as a later development, but right from the start.
Yeah.
As soon as you say you can kill a single person, you open the door to eugenics.
Right.
May I interject that this is personal to me? There's a side effect that people don't often consider, and that is that when you kill these babies, you don't find ways to cure. Now, I've got a grandson with cystic fibrosis, a 3-year-old grandson, and that's one of the genes now being isolated, you know, to kill. Right. And so when you do that, when you kill 60, 70, 80% of CF babies before they're born, you cut off ways to learn how to treat these kids. And
I think it's worse than that. I think not only do you cut out ways to study it, you cut out the will to study it.
Yes,
that's right.
Because you're now, every time we see some sort of new technology come along, and again, we've talked about this many times in the past, especially as it relates to the unborn. We can now detect this, or we can now detect this, and we can now, the first thing out of the person's mouth who makes this discovery is, this will help people decide earlier in a pregnancy what decision they want to make. Well, that means abortion.
Right.
That's what that means. And so if you're, and Down syndrome would be a good example of this, you don't have to look for ways to treat Down syndrome or to deal with Down syndrome babies if you're going to kill them all. So why would you go out and spend billions of dollars looking for cures for these things if the attitude of the society is they're not going to exist anyway because we're going to kill them all?
And this attitude doesn't stop.
Right.
In other words, if you can stop the problem of Down syndrome babies by killing those babies, well then stop the problem of crime by killing the criminals, stop the problem of poverty by killing the poor, stop whatever problem you want by killing the people who are causing that problem. And then you have mass annihilation. And that's exactly what abortion is.
Well, nobody in the country was closer to this than you were with the Terry Schiavo thing.
Exactly.
Because that's exactly what was going on right there. We don't want to deal with Terry Schiavo, so let's kill her.
That was not an end-of-life decision case. That was let's kill the disabled case.
Yeah.
She was healthy. She had the brain injury, but she could have lived for decades.
Well, and as we're distilling these arguments, these have already been made by the eugenicists.
Right.
That's what Stalin did. Eugenics, at its core, is to purify the race.
Right.
And that's what they're doing. We don't need people with cystic fibrosis or Down syndrome or any sort of ailment. You know, there's a movie years ago called Gattaca.
Right.
Where they literally were attempting in this science fiction movie to make the perfect human being. And they would do so through eugenics, positive and negative eugenics.
Well, that was Adolf Hitler.
This
we
is
him earlier, and that's where we are.
This is the application.
This is what we're doing.